Welcome back to the channel once more, my brother. It's been a while. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. We just talked before the camera went on, so I think I'm doing fairly well. Started the new year okay. I mean, there's some stuff in our private life that I think required some attention, but overall, I feel pretty good about this year. I think we mentioned before that this is the year that I will be getting married, so that's a good thing to look forward to. So I'm good. How are you? How have you been? Well, I know
Yeah,
you've been unwell, but maybe you should
I've
tell them.
I've been lacking. I've been slacking because this is the first time on the channel I didn't upload on Sundays,
Oh,
which was last week. Because so my wife got sick like straight after New Year's. We got back from France, and then after a week, I got sick as well. And when you're a couple, when one is sick, the other's kind of sick, or will get sick. But even when she's sick, I'm kind of sick in action because I'm not doing anything because I'm taking care of her. And that
yeah.
was kind of during the break, so that was kind of annoying. And then uh missed work, and I must say, like, being sick, I've spoken about it quite a bit with just friends around me and stuff like that.
Hmm.
How, I don't know, such a lack of a lust for life that I
Yeah.
wasn't prepared for. I was like, I'm never doing a podcast again. I'm not eating. I don't want to work anymore. My whole being just didn't want anything, and I just, man, I was just disgusted with everything. It was crazy. And then I was just thinking what it would feel like to be in this state of mind for a month, 2 months, a life. I just, I was, the first day I got really sick, I was walking on the street and just to get some air. And I just had to stop myself from saying, like, I can't do this. This is terrible. Like, I just had to stop. I just felt all those thoughts festering. And it's all very dramatic because I never get sick. So for me, it's just like unknown territory. And yeah, I just want to share a bit about that. But now,
Yeah, but
like, getting
I,
back to it, it's so nice. Everything is so awesome. Like, just doing
yeah.
normal things. I'm so happy. So yeah.
I remember telling you at some point, like, I think your viewers know that you've stopped drinking for a while, like years, like what is it, like 6 years now, something like that, or no,
Yeah. 5 years or so.
5 years, yeah.
5 years and a
You
half.
know, I mean, like Lucas should be the judge of that, but like, it's not like he stopped drinking out of the necessity that he was ruining his life or something like that. But it might nonetheless be what do you call it, a wise health decision. But what I told him that some it is still nice to drink a little and then to be hungover,
Yeah.
and then, because if you're hungover, and the same happens, by the way, when you're sick, but when you're sick, it's usually for multiple days. It's like uh, you're forced to not be productive for a day, and that is like something's really good. So you truly have to relax. But then also the next day, exactly what you just described, like you feel that, like, oh, I feel so good today because yesterday I felt so bad. So I'm not saying try to
He's
get
advocating
hungover
for
like
alcoholism.
exactly. For me, I get like hungover like once a year. I'm reminded like sufficiently that, oh yeah, I don't want to be hungover all the time. So
Yeah.
I'm definitely not advocating it. But and I do also find that sometimes sickness can really have this interesting, almost like psychedelic effect, because you have like those types of fever
Fever
dreams.
dreams, man. Oh
Yeah.
my God. I
Uh,
was thinking of crime and punishment throughout all my dreams.
yeah.
And so I'll say this to people who have watched the show. I've been watching Lost. Um, and I've been finding it very interesting, but I personally think it gets really bad after 3 seasons because, and this director said themselves, they have no plan after the third season and they just kept
Yeah.
getting renewed. And then it turns into some time machine stuff that I find parallel reality, time machine stuff. I just can't follow. I think it's too stupid. But I had nightmares every day about Lost and it was terrible to the point that I decided I was like, Jules, I can't watch this anymore. We're gonna look on YouTube, watch recap 4, 5, 6, just to know what happened, to have peace of mind. And that's how I kind of got rid of those fever dreams because I just needed to know.
Ah.
I needed to
Oh,
know what happened in those seasons because I kept getting nightmares about being on that
but
island. And
does that mean you also stopped watching the show for that reason? Like now you
yeah,
know? Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I used to watch along with our parents as they were watching it back in the day, but not like I didn't follow all of it. So I haven't watched the first few seasons, and part of me is still tempted to rewatch that and do it properly. But at the same time, just knowing that indeed everyone is complaining so much about the end, I'm not even sure if I would recommend like watching Game of Thrones, knowing how the
Yeah.
show ends. It's weird. Like if you know that something has a truly bad ending, like but it's hard to say, like
No, I will
yeah,
say I actually think the ending is okay. A lot of people complain about the ending because they think it means that they were in purgatory or whatever, or like it's not real. That was not my issue with it. My issue was just the direction. And so I would say if you watch it, it's still worth watching the first three seasons
yeah,
because I think it's some of the best TV I've seen.
yeah,
I think it's
yeah.
really good.
I think I might watch it at some point, just watch it again because it was so interesting. Like I remember just being like it's completely like what do you call it, like riveting. I don't know what the right word is, but
I
like
know
when
what
I
you
was
mean.
watching it with my with our parents.
Yeah,
So maybe I will do it at some
it's
point.
interesting.
I now started watching because I just saw the second season is out and I haven't yet watched the first season, or the second season is coming out now. Severance. I'm not sure if you heard of it.
No.
Yeah, okay. So this is also something that like first I was watching it last night and I had like the same that I was like it's a little bit disturbing. Like it's this like sci-fi premise a little bit that like it's in the future but not so much like it seems like, just how stuff looks today. And we follow a character who is working at a company, but while working at that company because he's working with very classified stuff, he needs to undergo a procedure. He agrees to this. People who work there agree to this, that their brain is severed in some ways. That means that they, from that point onwards, have no, they are not conscious of the life outside of work, and the life outside of work is not conscious of their life inside the work.
Oh,
And that's beneficial maybe in some ways, but the weird thing is obviously that then the person inside the work feels trapped there, like they can't really leave, you know. And obviously like you'll find out soon enough like something fishy is going on, like is this company entirely ethical? But I'm only on episode 2, so I'm not even spoiling that much. This is all like
yeah.
but it's completely like yeah, I don't know, confusing and disturbing to watch some of it, even though it's not that scary, you know. It's just more like disturbing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm not watching that. Like for me, that's
Yeah.
it's this type of territory. It reminds me of this Neuralink and stuff like that. I
Yeah,
just
yeah, yeah, for
for me
sure.
it's too far. I just don't want to expose myself to it at all. Like not even a little bit.
But for me, like that's like actually useful to expose yourself a little bit to that because like then you play out in fiction. That's I think what Black Mirror did, like that TV show for a
Yeah.
while. Like you play out in fiction something that might happen, and then you are aware of the risks involved a little
Yeah.
bit. Just like, I remember like thinking about the topic we might discuss today.
Yeah.
Like I remember watching the movie Her, and that helped me make sense of like people interacting with ChatGPT now,
Yeah.
like
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, like that
Yeah.
helped to have exposed myself to it, even though it's like a little bit disturbing at the time.
Yeah. I really get what you mean, and I like quite a bit of Black Mirror.
Yeah,
But then there was this one episode,
yeah.
I don't know, I think it was the Christmas one where do you remember
Yeah, I
what
was trapped in the end,
yeah,
right?
it's like White Christmas and he's trapped in some, and that to me it's
Yeah,
such a hell experience. Like it
yeah.
comes a little too close for me. Just,
Oh, I get it. I get that.
it's too much. It's so
Yeah, and also like Black Mirror, it has some really bad episodes too. Like
yeah.
so, I'm not saying it's a great show. I'm just saying some of them are really interesting. But no, I totally understand
So
what you.
did you watch Squid Game?
Well, though it's like one show that I started, but I just didn't finish. But I do want to get back into it because now the second season is out again, like also for that show. And I heard that second season is also pretty interesting. It's not as good as the first one apparently, but I'm tempted because like, but the thing is like sometimes if a show is like really overhyped in the moment, have that sometimes with movies too that I'm like, yeah, now I'm not watching it. Like
Yeah,
now.
yeah, I really get that. And my little brother said the same. He's like,
Yeah,
I was speaking to him on the phone about it because I thought Squid Game was like some cringy thing because I saw Mr. Beast
yeah,
made a video about it when it was coming out. So I thought it was just some cringy thing. And then I saw that season two came out last week, and I saw a trailer for the second season, and then I was kind of intrigued. It's like, oh, this kind of a Hunger Games type of situation.
yeah.
And so I watched the first season. I haven't watched the second one, but I kind of binged it last week. And I will say it's a very interesting show if you want to understand human psychology. And I don't know, it reminds me a lot of, what Peterson talks about, what if you were the Nazi guard, or what if you were
Oh
in the
yeah.
position of like how far human beings actually go under certain circumstances, like how much of to me, it really made me think of a lot of stuff that we think about in terms of the things that we take for granted in terms of human values and human worth,
Yeah.
how quickly that can go out the window. And also, I mean, South Korea is an interesting use case because it's basically this Americanized um, country that, I mean, they are completely infested with the meaning crisis.
Yeah,
That's
that's
very
correct.
much something that plays there. And then seeing how this plays out, this show, where basically a bunch of people that are in massive debt get this opportunity to join the show and to join this game, these
Yeah.
games really, and they find out at the first game that you get killed if you
Yeah,
lose,
yeah, yeah,
and then
yeah.
they still come back
Yeah.
because there's this really small chance that you're the one person that gets all that money. Like that's crazy, and it's I honestly think it's really, really well done. So it's like an overhyped show, or it's a very hyped show, but I think it's actually really interesting just from that point of view. And
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
about the moon, so
No,
I,
it's like, and we sometimes forget about just the existence of, the dark web and what happens on the dark web because we're
yeah,
web. And on the light web, everything is kind of okay. But if and it's not even that okay. Like, there's lots of terrible stuff happening on the light web, but on the dark web, like there's truly dark stuff happening. So, it's not like it's so far-fetched from, our human understanding. And by the way, like another show that I can recommend now that we're on this anyways, but is The Penguin. I don't know if you heard of it, but
yeah. The Batman spin-off.
yeah, but that makes it sound sillier than it is because it's just like a good mafia show, honestly. That
Is
that
it in
that
any way still tied to like Batman? Does he come up? Does he appear in the show?
Batman does not appear in the show. Sorry
Um,
for spoilers, but there's no Batman in the show. There's not even, I think, a reference to Batman, but it is that like the series starts where that movie ends. So
okay,
there's everyone is aware of like let's say what happened at the end of that movie and what
yeah,
that meant for the city, etc. But then the series takes over. But I'm bringing this up in this regard because it's also about let's say an individual who we follow, and it has asked these questions like is there something like true evil or is it all let's say societally constructed? So yeah, it might also be interesting and just a really good but also yeah difficult to watch
yeah.
show sometimes, but honestly like one of the best shows I watched last year. So
That's good. I'm really bothered by the idea that evil doesn't exist, and I notice I have a almost a violent reaction to when I hear people say that. I
yeah.
don't know how because you told me, and this really stuck with me that if something's bothering me, it says something about myself or something that.
Yeah, I think that that's a Jungian thing, right? Like projection, like if you something if
What am I projecting?
well, I think that that's something to figure out. Like I'm not the one to tell you exactly. Like I need to know a little bit more. First of all, like I'm not necessarily qualified to say so, but second
Yeah.
of all, I need to know like a very detailed, specific case. Like sometimes like you are annoyed by an action or a character trait by some specific individual, and that helps you point out something you might not have
Okay.
considered within yourself. So like yeah, the non-existence of evil is a really difficult one, I'd say.
Okay.
It's like
We can discuss it privately, and I'll tell you about the interaction and everything. Because
that's great, that's great. That sounds
yeah.
good. Sure.
Okay. So I want to speak a little bit about the afternoon we had here a while back, and people will be introduced to Gertjan and Florian on this channel soon. So for those who don't know a little bit of background, me and Aaron had this episode at my parents' place. Surviving the End of the World is what I titled it. I don't fully remember what we spoke about. But anyway, Aaron mentioned that he had a talk in Utrecht, uh, I don't know, that week or something about
I
beauty.
think I think I had like it was right after your wedding actually that I had the talk. Like so
Yes, this
that's
was
why you
the,
were able to
yeah,
be there.
yeah. And the Breakwater Festival came up and everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So Gertjan watched this um, episode and then he was like, oh, we could actually go to this. So
Well, it's also weird. Like that means that, I know Gertjan is probably listening to this. So it's like, but that means that he must have like, let's say, Googled me, but it's like, or Googled us, I don't know, and then found like, whoa, what such a coincidence. Like apparently there's like on the Utrecht agenda, like it says like, oh, there's a cultural event where Adam is going to be talking at, so
Yeah.
um,
Yeah, I
yeah,
didn't even put a link in the description or anything. So anyway, Gerjan and Florian, who you will get to know soon, went to that and they spoke to Aaron, and so you went to speak to them and you had dinner with them or something like that, right?
that's correct. Yeah, they're the most like they're the kindest individuals. Like I mean, we're gonna link to their channels probably like
Yeah.
below this, so like you can already see so for yourself. Even though it's in Dutch, I very much recommend just getting a sense. Like I think the last episode that is up right now, like at this moment, are you uploading this today or later, like next week?
Today. Yeah.
Today, okay, yeah. So the last episode that is up right now features Florian interviewing, I think Joke Herms is her name, about time. And most of the other episodes feature Gerjan. So you get a sense of both of their styles. But they're both incredibly talented um, yeah, filmmakers and also good interviewers. You find that very clearly. And they're very interested in everything that sort of we're talking about in this space. So I think that's worthwhile. And yeah, like they invited me, well, they came up to me after the talk, which was kind of fun because like many of my students were there. So it was like wild to sort of like that they were also confronted like, wait, you have internet fans? And I was like, I didn't know I had internet fans. Like, no, that was a thing. But that was really fun. And then they said like, yeah, we should meet up. So I think we exchanged phone numbers and then they invited me and I had a lovely dinner at their house and they showed me their first um, produced film, which is really good. Like I was really impressed because like sometimes if you hear that someone is a filmmaker, you don't know if that's like oh it's like a hobby, and even if it's actually like your work. But like I thought it was really like professionally done. So I mean, people get to see it because it will be uploaded tomorrow. So that will probably also be linked here below, at least from tomorrow
Yeah,
onwards.
tomorrow I'll link it.
Yeah, so it's really well done, I'd say,
Okay.
and that just kind of caught my interest. And after that, I which kind of kept talking and saw each other multiple times. Met up also with other folks that are from within the space, like Cassidy, for instance. Yeah, so that's been really wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah.
What about you? What is your impression of them?
Well, so
Without
I
being
got
here
to
so in public.
yeah. No, so I got to know them at like an estuary we went to. And we spoke a lot about you and we spoke about this little corner. And it was just so fun to I guess meet them because I don't think they'd interacted a lot with people that, watch Vervaeke and Peugeot and Peterson. So
Oh, pretty. Oh, well, careful, careful, careful. But that was indeed like while you're fixing this, I'm gonna
my
continue.
freaking dad calling me. I'm
Yeah,
gonna I'm gonna shame him after this. So
that's good. That's
I'll
good. I'll
fix
just
it on
keep
the
talking.
camera. You keep talking.
Yeah, yeah. But that was already interesting in itself because you kind of get used to like, okay, this is how we now interact sort of in meet space with each other. Like, even though some of us like know each other online. And I think that's interesting because you could see like it was dawning on them like, wait, other people are actually have like invested as much time in this as
Yeah.
we have. Like, and they were like really puzzled and amazed by it, to just talk to us and be like, oh, I thought like they thought it was something that they only shared with each other. Like you sometimes hear that um, when, for instance, Jonathan Peugeot talks about how he was working all these things through with his brother
Yeah.
um, before all of this happened. So it's like, like, oh, it's like, it's like I probably were crazy, like because we talked to each other. But then at some point, like people started, getting it. And um, I always do a little bit, I'm always trying to be mindful of, let's say, the outsider viewer who is watching, for instance, who's visiting your channel for the first time and is like, what are they talking about? Like,
Yeah.
what are they talking?
Yeah.
Like I totally imagine. But anyways, yeah,
No, so yeah, that was super fun. And it kind of also revivified all of this for me to see it through someone else's eyes
yeah,
and to see how much enthusiasm there is and kind of reminded me of the importance of the meaning crisis and
yeah,
thinking about religion in an existential way, let's say, to see someone else
I
going
agree.
through that. And of course, it's been existential for me, but I hadn't discussed it with many people outside of the podcast, where in this space, it's just such a normal thing to talk about that kind of the emotional gravity sometimes seems to have been lifted from it. And
Yeah,
so, yeah,
yeah,
that was super fun. And so I got to know them. and been in contact ever since. Been watching their podcasts. Got a little WhatsApp group. We met up here and we did some practices, and that was your initiative. Uh, and that was really special actually, and I something that I really recommend. And maybe you can say something about the practices we did and
Yeah.
how that went for you. How was that experience?
Yeah, so like these practices are not my own. I've become familiar with them through John Vervaeke, and I think at least Gerjan and probably Florian a little bit. Yeah, I think Florian as well. Like they are both also familiar with some of the same practices, not all of them. And then it's not like they originated with John Vervaeke. Like he just let's say puts some different language on it, but more or less like this goes back, millennia through different traditions. So for instance, one of them that we didn't do that day, but is, Lectio Divina, which is obviously a Christian monastic practice. But you can use that for, like, if you believe, and not saying everyone has to believe this, but if you believe that, let's say, wisdom at least is universal, that doesn't mean that all of the texts in the world, let's say, contain all of the insights necessary, but just that, great minds and great sages, they have something useful to say from which you can learn something for better or worse. Then you can apply Lectio Divina to those texts. You should be careful to do it with people, who are maybe a little bit less reliable or who went completely sideways during their life, or maybe who are alive still. I think you talked to John Fakey about that, like that, if people are still alive, then it's dangerous to do so because you don't know where they're headed, and then maybe
Mm.
you're internalizing something that is also, has some of those same tendencies to
Yeah,
go off the rails. But that's not necessarily the practice we did, which is indeed the Lectio Divina, or uh, I think it's Vervaeke refers to it as a philosophical fellowship practice. We started off with a meditation and a contemplation exercise, and Vervaeke always emphasizes that it's good to have both. Like we've sort of over valorized the meditative aspect, and which is good. Like, oh, now I'm being called by my dad. My
yeah.
goodness.
So, well, I'll say the meditative. He explains that as kind of looking at
Yes.
your glasses, right? To look at your perception and
Yes.
try to
At the
see,
glasses, exactly. That's correct.
yeah, to
Yeah.
see if there's something wrong with your view. And then how would you describe the contemplative initiative?
Well, I'm still visible, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah, you're
checking
all
like,
good.
oh, okay, good. The contemplative, well, how John Vervaeke explains it is indeed like, okay, if during meditation you look at the glass to see like, are there any stains on it? Like, are they still transparent? So just like you look at your, let's say, process of awareness. So
Mhm.
both, let's say, how external stimuli come into the senses, but also how internal, let's say, thoughts and sensations come up. So that's looking at the glasses, but then at some point, like knowing you've like if you looked at them, you need to put them on and look through them, and that's really what like the ancient Greeks were also about, like the theoria, has the sense of looking deeply into reality. And you can imagine it's not just about just awareness of everything, but also using that awareness to then think and I don't just mean think in this logistical sense, but like spiritually think, maybe almost.
Yeah,
In the sense that DC Schindler told you that thinking can be a spiritual exercise, that you can
yeah,
look into reality in that sense. This is what the Greeks had the nous for, like the noetic type of exercise. Um, and if you combine those two, you can really, well, obviously, like it makes sense on that metaphorical level, right? Like you need to clean your glass in order to see through them, but you don't just clean them and then not look through them, but you also have to clean them every now and then. So you need both of those. Um, and so I think we start off with that, and it was really useful because Gerjan was already familiar with some of those practices. So he actually, I think, guided at least a part of that meditative and contemplative exercise. And then we did this noticing practice. And I think we could maybe link to the After Socrates
yeah,
10A and B episodes to give people an idea of what this is like, because it was pretty similar to how they enacted it. But one of the advantages to the noticing practice is really that you're trying to stay completely present, and it helps you to disrupt normal thinking patterns. So we are often caught and stuck in our egocentrical way of thinking, and also we're distracted all the time. But also, like we normalize thinking patterns throughout every day because we're just like, oh, we think about this thing and this thing. So it's really difficult to just stay in the moment. That's also what meditation trains you to do. So by doing the noticing practice, just being with each other and saying, "Oh, being here with you, I'm noticing this," and just whatever comes up, you just kind of say you're trying to be honest and mindful about it. So it's also difficult to actually say something negative. I
Yeah.
remember asking me at some point, like, yeah, but don't you sometimes feel like you could insult someone? But it's like, I don't know, that just doesn't come up when interestingly enough. But anyways, and then you could maybe even address that if it does happen. But you just kind of stay with everything that's happening there. So you're not relating to a different subject matter. So right now, you and I, and let's say whoever is listening or viewing this, we are talking about the noticing practice as something separate. But I'm not, let's say, completely in tune with you saying like, being here with you, I'm noticing the light on your face, just to name something fairly simple. So I think we did that for a while, and then we expanded that exercise into asking deep questions and trying to sort of reformulate the answer that the other individual gave to kind of really see like to not just ask deep questions but also do deep listening and really see if we're sort of on the same level. And it created this, I think, very nice sort of in-depth experience of yeah what they sometimes refer to as the shared we space, to have this
Yeah.
kind of it's a different type of being present. I actually had, so sorry to finish this off very quickly, but I had a Twitter interaction today with someone who was critical of it because he thinks that this is like, this is like a Gnostical type of sort of a Gnostic type of exercise because it's all about, let's say, equality without hierarchy, etc. But I think it has its place. So I'm not saying this should substitute, let's say, rituals that do involve hierarchy, but I think they can nonetheless be an extremely useful supplement to them.
Yeah.
But yes, that's
Yeah,
just
for sure. No, I experienced it as beautiful, and I've what I found cool about it is that every time it was my turn to notice something, I really didn't know what I was gonna say until, you
yeah,
open your eyes and you're actually noticing, and so it really pulls
exciting.
you into the moment. That's really cool, and that makes it feel like there's sort of like a fifth, in our case, fifth presence of something guiding you, and so yeah, it is highly recommended. I'm thinking right now, Guy Sangstock,
Yeah.
was part of that. He was on my friend Michael's channel. So just
Oh,
as an
nice.
aside, I'm gonna link that because it doesn't have nearly enough eyeballs on it as it should. So I hope
Yeah,
people watch it.
oh, sorry, did you want to continue on that point or
No, go
like?
ahead. No.
Okay, yeah. Like I remember just to share for instance one I thought quite beautiful moment for us, let's say as brothers, is that I remember you looking at me during that practice and say like, "Oh, I think this is a moment to get to know you in a new way."
Yeah.
Uh, Something along those lines.
Yeah.
I thought it was a really like beautiful comment, and it also I think it makes sense because just what I just shared about those normal thinking patterns is like, yes, we have a very authentic relationship. I mean, extremely authentic, but just like with any other relationship, like you overlay that with, let's say, the type of dynamic uh, that seems, what do you call it, like self-evident to you. So it's
Yeah.
like we have
Yeah.
a dynamic like we're brothers, and like I'm the older brother, you're the younger brother, like, and there's something about that, even though like we try to go beyond that, like we're also that, and we can find great like a love and excitement sort of in that brotherly bond. But
Hmm.
it's also good to sometimes try to see like, yeah, but can I see you beyond that overlay of
Yeah.
like you are my younger brother and I'm your older brother. And the same, it's a good practice to do with your with other loved ones, but also obviously with people who you don't like at all. Like it's good to look
Yeah.
at that dynamic with them.
Yeah.
So
I think it makes people irreducible in some sense. It
yeah,
removes this whether it's a label or a dynamic, and it allows another person to unfold. And that's to me that's such a spiritual practice. Like I've done that. I've had that happen to me just in
yeah,
well interactions at work, for example, that I feel this magical opening of I don't know a person expanding.
yeah.
Like I see them expanding in front of me, and I see like their almost their divinity unfold. So yeah, so it's really special, and I'm really happy you took that initiative because
Yeah.
remember
No,
that
thank you
very
for
exciting.
obviously giving us the space to do so. It was really nice, and I'm sure it won't be the last time because I think it was really fruitful. And by
Yeah,
the way, these are also good practices to do online. Like I've done it 2 days ago with friends of mine, one of whom is in sort of Australia, and the other one who is in England, and
Oh yeah.
super well. And that's the thing. Like, and all three of us were like, and not always. Like, I kind of compare it to, let's say, a good musical jamming session where it's like, like you hopefully everyone gives it the best they got, and like, and you're trying to resonate to each other and play along, and sometimes you get into the zone and it works well. Like, you run across the logos, like,
Yeah.
the logos catches fire, etc.
Yeah.
But sometimes it doesn't, and that's fine because you can't summon it. You can't say like, well, now we're just gonna start having a great jam together. It's like, no, you kind of have to try and start, and then often it works, but not always. But for instance, last Friday it worked really well again, so that's really
That's
useful.
good. So before I forget to actually get to the things that we discussed beforehand, um,
That's
so
correct. Yeah.
Gertjan and Florian had an event last Friday.
Yes.
Well, not last Friday, but the Friday before.
9 days ago.
And I was really sad to miss it. Been really looking forward to it. But it was a premiere of their film, and then you were one of the speakers as well. Now, don't want to speak too much of the whole event and the film, etc., because I will have them on to talk about that. But I did think it would be interesting just for me to know what you spoke about, and
Yeah.
for the people at home just to get an idea of what you discussed. Because I mean, you speak to people that are also really outside of this space that we're in, and so how you approach that, for example, compared to giving a class to philosophy students or within this little corner giving a talk.
Yeah, so I was deeply sort of honored by the question to speak there. It was really wonderful because I said I was so impressed by the film itself. So it was really nice to share some thoughts and try to at least be, let's say, a conduit through which some reflections could emerge. And I already shared with you a little bit before. It's not like I had like something I felt truly original to say. Like for me, it was really an opportunity to have some fun. And I mean, I also have fun teaching, but then I really stick to, let's say, the subject matter that I have to discuss. And even with research, like you have certain etiquettes and conventions that you have to keep in mind. And obviously now there's also etiquettes and conventions. But in terms of the subject matter, I was fairly free to do so. I just wanted to do justice to their film, and I felt, you'll find if the film is linked below, like hopefully that's from tomorrow onwards, that the film itself is about addiction. And I was obviously reminded of something that has been present in this little corner, which is the concept of reciprocal opening. And by the way you just shared, getting to know someone intimately through some of those practices, that is a good showcasing of reciprocal opening. Um, because John Vervaeke often makes this case that through his colleague Mark Lewis, and that was, by the way, nice because we were in the Netherlands, and Mark Lewis, he's not Dutch, but he has been working at Radboud University for a long time, so I could also make it a little bit feel more a little bit at home for many people. He's one of the, let's say, I think, leading experts on addiction in the world, and he has. I don't think he used this exact word, but you can find it very clearly in some of his papers where he describes this process of what is referred to as reciprocal narrowing. That,
Mhm.
as we sort of um, we try to escape from our environment, that's what happens when we get addicted to something, because we need something in order to sort of stay grounded, because we don't want to be confronted with the external reality. But by doing so, we become less cognitively flexible. And that is not just a neutral thing. It's not just that that's something happening in me. Like he's really trying to sort of remind us, well, that means that as a consequence, your interaction with your environment also gets affected. So it's not just about what's happening inside of you, it's about what the relationship between you and your world. And therefore, the environment itself also seems to narrow down, because as you, for instance, get drunk, if you're an alcoholic, it's like the environment will show less opportunities, like less opportunities will manifest in front of you. And accordingly, like you'll feel even more reason to escape. So you narrow further and the environment narrows further. So there's this sense of reciprocal narrowing. And that's why I got this sense, listening to John Vervaeke, that indeed the opposite of reciprocal narrowing is not sobriety, which you would expect, because reciprocal narrowing is, for instance, addiction. So then it would be sobriety, but it would be something like love, like in true love, like you open up continually to the other individual, or it doesn't even have to be an individual, but as a consequence, it or they, like they open up to you as well.
Mm.
I wanted to explain that a little bit to the group, and I did so by making a little bit more philosophical, so adding some part on, let's say, Cartesian dualism, René Descartes, on how to problematically think about our relationship to the environment, and therefore thinking that addiction is something inside us,
Yeah.
and thinking more about Heidegger, about, no, actually, it's always about being attuned in a certain way to our environment. And then maybe we can think about, like, in the sense of attunement, we can also think about addictions. And because I was sort of then getting this sense, because you'll find in the film, like there's this continuous line of like, I need something that gets me out of this circle, because they describe this, let's say, the reciprocally narrowing circle. Um, it's like a vicious circle downwards. So I was like,
Yeah.
yeah, but it doesn't necessarily have to be that you have to get rid out of circles altogether. It is conceivable that there's this, let's say, this virtuous circle
Yeah.
upward, of reciprocal
Yeah.
narrowing, something continuously
It's
open.
funny. I will interrupt quickly.
Yeah,
So
go ahead.
towards my wife one time on a school report, she was described as a virtuous circle. I always remember that she told me that once.
Nice.
She was good in school, so
Yeah,
a
that's
little.
great. That's a huge compliment, honestly. Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
And I
Yeah.
was a little bit aware that I knew the other two speakers were theologians, and I'm not a theologian myself, so I didn't want to have, like, let's say, an overtly Christian message to it.
Yeah,
I decided to
that's
end it
smart.
up with a critic of religion, Nietzsche, who I know obviously a little bit more about. But I tried to combine it with the sense, like, maybe, we want this, let's say, upward, virtuous, circular movement in
Yeah.
our. So I emphasize that Nietzsche does not have the eternal recurrence of the same, but it's better translated as the eternal recurrence of the like,
Mm.
something resembling at least something that came before. Um, and then, he has this thought experiment about a demon like waking you up at night and saying you have to live this life like eternally again. And then Nietzsche says like you would probably curse him because, why would you want to live all aspects of this life, including the suffering, eternally again? But he says like, but what if, you would be able to tell that demon like, oh, you are a god and thank you for this, and if you would be doing that, then maybe you could truly affirm life, because you would be living the kind of life that you could affirm eternally, including all the moments of suffering. And I felt like that was also a useful message to maybe give a little bit, so that it wasn't just about, how do I say this succinctly? It wasn't just about, okay, you're in a bad place because you're addicted, but now you got to go to a good place and then
Yeah.
life. It's like, it's also like knowing that this is also part of what it means to live a difficult life. So it's about getting that, let's say, upward rotation, but also knowing that you'll come back to moments of suffering, but at
Yeah.
least forming the complete whole of it. And by doing so, you can sort of live it eternally. So that was that was like, it is already a short talk, so I might have spoiled much of
No,
it.
but it's not.
So,
It's good.
yeah. And I would just say I recommend watching it anyways, and maybe just turn on, let's say, the Dutch subtitles and translate them to English if you don't speak any Dutch, because the other speeches are also really good. Because one of them was about René Girard, and the other one was about
Cool.
Johan Huizinga, and also the German thinker Rosa. But like, maybe that's a little bit less
Yeah.
familiar.
Well,
But
Heisenberg is the name of the building you worked in. That's where
yeah,
I had classes.
yeah, nice,
Also
exactly, yeah.
the
So it's
Leiden.
and indeed, Madelief also knew the Huizinga Institute. Yes, he's a
Yeah, yeah.
famous Dutch historian.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
No, I was thinking, you know, having been like a little sick now before this and the suffering, I in the moments that you're going through a really hard time, I really had this with drinking. I'll be like, I'm never gonna do this again. Um, and I could even conceive of a reality where if that would keep going, let's say for a month, I could
Yeah,
understand people wanting to end it.
yeah,
I
yeah,
really get it. And still, and this is kind of where I started to cringe at myself while I was sick. So I was saying I've always discussed mechanisms while I was sick, mostly at myself. Like I was just looking at myself when
hmm,
I'm in a good state of mind, just being like, I don't buy it. Like I really don't buy it. Like about how happy I
yeah,
supposedly am. And and then I get back into it and I go back to a worldview of like, well, just glimpses of real beauty and uh,
yeah,
I don't know,
yeah,
true joy. They make it all worth it for me.
yeah. I know
And
what you mean.
I just think it's so wild that you can be both, that both of those, let's say, thoughts or
Hmm.
beings are both are me. And
Yeah.
so how do you affirm life when you know that there's going to be times where, well, you find it extremely hard? Like, I know that if there's certain actions that I take, for example, I deprive myself of sleep for a week, I think, you know, you might want to stop. And
Yeah.
I don't know, that's just something that
No, no,
I
yeah.
was talking about.
It's actually something that I've thought about a lot. Actually, this is still a really um, difficult subject matter for me. Like looking back on it, I do think there was a time of my life when I was depressed. And I think one reason why getting out of it was particularly difficult was also because I really felt that being depressed, so that's a little bit different from being sick, but like that it was also my authentic self, like I was being honest. And
Yeah.
there's something we know
Yeah.
from scientific literature that there's something to this, that actually depressed people, they tend to have a more realistic self-image than non-depressed people because they're more optimistic, etc. So there's all these ways in which actually maybe depressed people are more honest. So I felt, and maybe that speaks a little bit to what you were saying, that like, are you being a fake when you're happy? Something like that. So I thought this was really difficult because, like I wanted to get better and I wanted to feel mentally healthy. And at the same time, I kind of felt like, yeah, but am I just being a complete fake individual while doing so? And it
Yeah.
really takes a while to indeed try to integrate that and try to give it a spot. Because that's really it. Like you should not try to repress it. I think that's most important. And I do feel that there's moments, and I find this now in art, especially, where I can really get a little bit back into some of these emotions I felt back then, but I can sort of channel them through that experience of the artwork, that otherwise would just completely overwhelm me. But it is really difficult to do so. And I would say one benefit or yeah, one advantage of uh, being depressed somewhat earlier in your life, and obviously getting out of it, because that's obviously a major aspect that needs to be
Mhm.
uh, yeah mentioned here, is you kind of have this sense of like, oh, I can handle it. Because if you get depressed at some point in your life while never having been depressed before, I completely affirm what you just said. It's like you have the sense of like, I'm never getting out of this anymore. It's
Yeah.
like you completely lose sort of all optimism for the future. It's like it's really difficult to see the point. And I think one of the things that got me going was simply just thinking about, you know, what I'd leave behind, if I would no longer be here. And that's not even from a selfish thing, like, oh, I don't want to lose that. It was really like I'm not sure if I can, if it's something that I would be comfortable bringing upon my family, something like that. And this is extremely difficult subject matter because of, stuff that has happened
Yeah.
recently, which I don't want to go into. But um, yeah, but I do think it's just good to share that, and I think be aware of that because so let's say if you are either if you're listening to this and if you're in it right now or if you are in it at some point in the future, just know, and that's really where probably I have felt more inclined to take religion more seriously than I did years previously, is like hope is justified in situations where it doesn't seem justified. And that's weird, like because you can't find reasons for justifying the hope at that point. But it's like but the sort of the proof is in the pudding. It's like if you sort of keep going, at some point you'll realize like I can get out of this. So I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm not sure if
Yeah.
I'm doing justice to your question though, because like
No,
it's
this is really good.
yeah. But
Yeah.
what about like what is your own way of dealing with that, like of affirming the whole of life if those aspects seem so similar, like almost two different individuals?
Ah, I think I just I use faith and prayer a lot. So I while I was walking on the street, first day of being sick, I feel so silly talking about being sick because like, it's really not that serious. Like I don't know if I was depressed, maybe as a teenager. I really don't think I was in a very good headspace as a teenager, but this is just for me the most recent experience of feeling very negative. So
Yeah.
bear with me. Um, I don't know. I kept trying to pull the plug out of those really bad thoughts and overriding them with knowing with the knowing that I have of a reality of beauty and a reality of of truth and of the goodness of existence. You know, it is very good, and a lot of that is faith based, and my faith is experience and trust based. And
Mhm.
so I knew that to some degree what my thoughts were, you know, unproductive and false, but I needed an other to be there with me. And so for me, talking with my wife was very helpful because
Yeah.
I have this thing, my sleepy self. When I'm very sleepy, I'm very irrational. Like,
Yeah, same.
I don't know, I will like claw at my fingers or whatever. I'll just do really stupid things while I'm while I'm like half asleep.
Yeah.
Um, and so my wife was telling me, you know, this is like your sleepy self, but you know, in your
True though.
conscious
There's
mind.
something in it, right? Like
Yeah. And it reminded me of, yeah.
there's something to I think what she's saying. Yeah. But anyways,
Yeah, it's like a sickness, and sleep is like a sickness, as Mathieu Peugeot says. But yeah, so I had to keep reminding myself of that, and I don't know, yeah, get out of my own perspective and ask God for guidance, and you know, I believe God to be good, and I've learned to stop saying why, and to like to stop saying why me, why am I going through this, and to start like trying to learn from whatever it is that I'm experiencing and take insights actually from it.
Mhm.
And another thing that actually really helped, which is, I mean, it seems a bit surface level, but I started really getting into like survival shows, people surviving in the wild, like in Alaska, and I don't know, in deserts and whatnot. I don't know why, but I had this deep motivation to watch all that stuff, whereas I've never watched any of this stuff before. I've
Mhm.
never been pulled by it. But to know that people go through so much harder stuff than what I was going through there, being on my little couch with a little bit of a throat ache, it really comforted me. And to see them still have, I don't know, faith and optimism and getting through it. And so that was actually really helpful. But so more than anything, to answer the question, is to rely on the faith that I have in of the goodness of reality, and definitely to not isolate my thoughts, but to open them up and to share them uh,
There's
with
a
my
really
wife and God. Yeah.
I think that's really nice. There's a really famous, incredibly famous American movie that all Americans have seen. So if you're American and listening, sorry to bother you with this, but everyone else should watch it, which is A Wonderful Life. It's Wonderful Life by like I think it's from the 50s even. Like it's
Yeah.
extremely old. And I remember actually we watched it as we got home from my grandfather's funeral at home, and like it is a little bit of a long movie, and it's like in black and white, even though I think we watched the colorized version, which is possible now. um, and I remember my sister and my mother being a little bit too tired, so they fell asleep I think halfway through. But Madalifa and I we stayed up through it, and it's like the most beautiful ending to that movie. And I'll speak a little bit about not about the ending obviously because I don't want to spoil, but what I do want to say is if you have these types of thoughts, it is a good movie to watch. And it's one of many movies that deals with this subject matter. Like it's very explicitly, like this is in the opening credits. Like it's a family movie, so it's like a family Christmas movie. Even though like I know it's no longer Christmas, but I still recommend watching it if you're curious after hearing this. Um, because it starts off with sort of a look into the night sky, and then it's clear that you hear a dialogue between two individuals who apparently are two angels, and they talk about this individual back on Earth, like this human being who is apparently so depressed that he's thinking about committing suicide. So, and they have this dialogue like, how are we going to help him, you know? And then the rest of the movie is just about, you know, the the life of that individual. So going back all the way to his childhood, and then obviously ending up in that situation, and then, you know. So I'm not going to say more about that, but it's it's extremely beautiful, and I think it's one of the right lessons and right ways of thinking about how you might be perhaps short-sighted as you
Mm.
are feeling depressed. And that's difficult because even though depressed people, in some sense, they are more honest, as I just stated, like they have a more realistic view. But sometimes to be, let's say, I think there's a Viktor Frankl clip that says like, optimists are the real realists. Like there's something about being optimistic that actually manifests reality in this positive way, which if you were realistic, actually manifests less of it. So
Yeah.
it's like creating more reality as you are. I'm not saying, let's say, not being naively optimistic. Like I always find that's probably one of the worst things that I encountered as I was feeling depressed is just talking to people and people saying like, yeah, sometimes you feel like that, but it'll get better.
Mm.
Like, it's like, like no, it doesn't really seem like you understand what's going on. It's just so
I really get that.
yeah. So but anyways, like I just recommend yeah, dealing with that. Like it's tough, man. It's honestly one of the things that will shake, for instance, your whole worldview.
Yeah.
It's really difficult. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think we'll all be tested in that sense, in that regard. So I'm uh I'm willing to receive any tips that I can. So
Yeah.
we're actually nearing the end of our time. Is there anything else you'd like to discuss before we finish? Or
Yeah, so like I have a few minutes. Like I think that Madeleine should be home at some point, but not yet. So she'll be coming home. Like we're gonna start cooking dinner, etc.
yeah,
I don't know what else really I want to share. Like I told you that one exciting thing, but that's something we can honestly talk about later because I'll be talking that through during the next few weeks.
yeah,
Is that I'm now teaching on the subject matter of friendship, and I think it's a pertinent subject matter in general. Like there we have a friendship crisis. People have fewer friends, and there's also other data that suggests, for instance, that even if people have a similar amount of friendship is like, for instance, major life decisions, they'll now they will now more likely ask their parents for good advice as opposed to a good friend, whereas a few decades ago they would ask a good friend for advice.
ah,
Yeah, that's for instance one really interesting data point.
it's
Uh,
almost opposite to what I would expect
yeah, why?
because I feel like nowadays people have much worse family bonds, family ties, and like
Hmm.
I mean, also friendships are pretty bad, but yeah, I guess intuitively I would have said that back in the, a couple of decades ago, you would ask your family more so for help than friends. But yeah,
Yeah, I think there's something to that, but I think just major things like, I don't know, buying a house
yeah,
or getting married, that is just
that makes
like,
sense.
yeah, why would you bother your friends with that? Like we're all struggling so much. And like there's also socioeconomic factors to it which make life today different than it was like a couple decades ago. So it's complicated. But and as Verweke sometimes also says, like it almost sounds like a page out of George Orwell to hear that the UK has a ministry of loneliness, but it's just but like it's
That's crazy.
pretty concerning. But anyways,
Yeah.
like it's a pertinent subject matter in general, but we're now also discussing it in the context of online friendships. Like first of all, can they exist? And if they can exist, can they be similar to traditional conceptions of friendship? And we're considering some arguments favor of it, arguments against it. And I haven't made up my mind about it, honestly. Like I probably would have been more skeptical towards it before this little corner. And at the same time, this little corner is also itself skeptical to it because they keep emphasizing, like, it's not about this, what we're doing behind the screen. It's about, a life that you're living outside of this. But at the same time, I'm curious. I do think that many of us here, I'm not even sure if I'm including myself in this. Like, well, I think I am. I'm just saying I haven't made up my mind about it. Like saying that you are friends with some of these people that you're mostly in contact with online, and some of them exclusively so far. You know, it's like
Yeah.
so that is definitely a subject matter I'd like to discuss, and we can either start it now or we can maybe talk about something else for a few minutes or leave that for a future episode because obviously a big subject matter.
Yeah, I mean, I think we'll probably discuss it in the future more at length. But what I will say about it is that I remember when I asked John Vicky about DC Schindler, he said that he can't call him a friend because he'd never met him, whereas they know each other quite well. So uh, there's maybe some wisdom in there.
Yeah.
But uh, but yeah, I would be happy to discuss this also after you've taught it a bit more, and then you
Yeah.
have maybe a more uh, clear view about it.
Have
But
you spoken, by the way, to your own introduction into teaching, like a little bit on this channel?
no, oh, so I'll talk a bit about that.
Yeah.
Um, Bit of a race against the clock, really, because I don't know. I don't know if I explained this before, but for those who haven't heard anything about it, I this last summer, I basically applied for a job as a, let's say, a teacher for elementary school, but you'll be teaching while you're actually getting your degree. And so I would have started that in the summer, but this company wasn't being completely truthful as to how guaranteed it was that we would all get a school to teach at right away. So that just kept getting delayed and delayed and delayed and delayed to the point that only in November I had like my first 2 weeks at a school, and even that was just a trial. Eventually cut ties with that company and went directly in contact with the school. So I finally got a school that would like to keep me,
Hmm.
but that's with the condition that I actually have to pass an assessment
Hmm.
start of February, which in normal circumstances, I would have started in the summer. So I would have had all these months to have been primed for that assessment. And now I've only officially started there last week because I was also sick before. And so I have a total of 2 weeks to pass that uh, assessment. And the assessments are only done twice a year. So if I don't pass it, I have to do it again in the summer.
Yeah.
And I mean, the headmistress told me that it is realistic because a lot of times when people do this at her school, they do it while they still have a job next to it. So they they get a total of like 80 hours of practice in, which I should be getting quite close to if I put the work in. But yeah, so that's kind of hanging on a little bit of a threat right now.
Yeah.
But the experience itself has been overwhelmingly positive. So I got that trial period at this school that I'm at right now. I had that in November with a different group, so that was age 9 or so. That was
Hmm.
really fun. And so what you can imagine is that right now I'm kind of a assistant teacher to the kids. I'm an actual teacher, so they understand my role. But you're not teaching that much. Like you get a couple of classes that you can teach gradually. Like next week, so I started with this group this last week, and next week I'll teach my first class there. But you answer their questions, you maintain order a bit, you get to know the kids, and yes, for me, it's been really good uh, getting to know this new group. It's a completely different group. Like the first group I had was mostly boys. So it was like 2/3 boys, 1/3 girls, and now 1/3 girls, and now it's the opposite. So it's quite a different dynamic, I must say. And the kids are a little bit older, so they're like 11 or so. So that's also a bit different. And in this school, the kids from age 11 onward are like separated from the other kids. So group in Dutch terms, group 7 and 8, or in American terms, grade 5 and 6, I'd say, are like in a different building. But that's just unique to the school. But it's also something that changes that dynamic.
Hmm.
Uh, but yeah, it's been really good. It's
I,
been I find it the most fun to build relationship with those kids, to get to know them, for them to get to know me. And
yeah.
yeah, I do really feel the conviction that this is what I should do for the next, I'd say, year or two for sure. Like I want to pass all those um, assessments and become a certified teacher. But maybe after that, I'll say I'll go into a completely different career direction. I haven't decided that for myself. I've dedicated myself to try to do it for 2 years. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's been positive, been fun. I like the fact that they're really, small, and they're little kids, and they're not like teenagers or even, I mean, I kind of teach adults at the gym. Like I do group classes, so getting to see both is quite fun.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it's super sweet. It's a lot of this reciprocal opening and like seeing individuals unfold, but like mini versions. And that's just really cute. Also
Also,
brings a lot of challenges, but yeah.
it's really nice, like especially like at that age, like they develop so much and so quickly. I mean, like sometimes they can be obviously like annoying because they
Yeah.
haven't learned some. basic decency sometimes. But at the same time, and I say this from experience because I've been leading summer camps or similar ages. But at the same time, like you can sometimes see them like develop something really in depth over the span of a few days, like which is just
Yeah,
like how do you develop so quickly? And I mean this like in the broad sense, not just that they get better at mathematics, which might also be impressive and really good, but also that they, become slightly more virtuous, even though they're
yeah,
children. So it's like, yeah, it's really, I'm really excited for you and happy to hear that, let's say, you're oriented there in a good way. And I think it maybe deserves also a conversation with someone else on this channel to get in depth on what is really unfolding there, because I think it's a
yeah.
big matter. Yeah.
I'd like to talk to Bob. He's a Chinese teacher. I think he teaches teenagers in China who are going to international schools. He's been on Christian's channel and I think Paul's as
Is
well.
he a Chinese teacher or does he teach Chinese? You know what I mean?
He's from China, so he teaches in China, and
Okay.
I don't know
Yeah.
what he teaches exactly. Um, but yeah, I'd like to talk to Bob because I know that that's the only person that I'm currently aware of that's like a teacher.
Yeah.
So
Nice.
I'll contact him. He doesn't. I don't think he knows me, uh, but yeah. No, this is someone that I had in mind for a while.
Yeah,
But I
nice.
have to see how this goes, and it's very exciting. And another thing, I didn't ask for this type of school, but I ended up at a Christian school like by coincidence. And I will say it's so. I think they incorporate faith in a very subtle but very beautiful way. Like they sing little songs and they pray and they thank at the end of the day. And I do see how it's fruitful in their behavior and the way that they think about the world. Like it might be like because it's a Protestant school, so I do see, of course, the criticism, this and that, but I just I used to be so critical of school system even before I started this. Um, and now I just like I see so many things that are going right. Like maybe I shouldn't criticize so much. There's so much that's like very wise in the way that they teach these kids. So
Yeah, and I think it's also like I'm not even saying specifically Christian, like also, you have the Montessori schools,
yeah,
etc. You have many schools, and I'm not saying you have to agree with all the dogmas that are part of that. I'm just saying there's something about a more, let's say, humanity,
yeah,
like uh, school system that tries to see kids as more than like I mean because for me the alternative is like you're raising them to participate in society, which is also really good. Like I think that's useful, but there's something about this conception of the individual who also has, let's say, a deep and rich psychology, and that's then, let's say, um, developing at that time. So to like be more mindful of how you're gonna integrate that on an artistic level, on, let's say, a more cultural level. How are you gonna do that with certain rituals, perhaps even, and I understand why people might be critical of the dogmatic aspect, but at the same time, like just think of what you would be leaving without behind without that.
yeah,
It's really uh, it can be really wonderful, and that's also why, yeah, it's definitely something that if I were ever to have children, I would consider it myself as well, and uh, not even necessarily a Christian school, but one that is more focused towards, let's say, um, sense making and a proper understanding of the human and where the sort of the human in the abstract sort of fits
yeah,
in what the human sort of needs, what does a child really need, and not
yeah,
just how do we make them functional.
yeah. Absolutely. I think that's a beautiful spot to end it. I mean, there's a lot of things that have popped up in the conversation that are like, oh, I want to talk to you about it, perhaps offline as well. But it's always an honor to
Yeah,
talk.
I mean, like for people watching, like I was supposed to obviously see Lucas earlier than this, but because he's been sick
Yeah,
for the first time, so hopefully we get to meet up in person very soon.
yeah,
And
that'd be
otherwise,
nice.
we'll have another conversation soon enough, I
Yeah,
presume. So, yeah.
absolutely. All right, say hi to Madeleine for me, and thank you so much
Say
for
hi to Jules.
talking to you. And we'll
Okay,
see you very soon. All right, thank you.
that's good.
Bye
Bye
bye.
bye.